Know when we're ready? Oh, you're on. Okay, thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Kristen Wong-Tam. I'm the Member of Provincial Parliament for Toronto Centre. I'm also the Ontario NDP official opposition critic for the Ministry of the Attorney General. What we're here to talk about is the similar collapse that we've seen in the healthcare system, hospitals that are full, that people cannot get access to immediate healthcare services when they need them. The same situation is now playing out in Ontario tribunals, and this has been happening since 2018 when Doug Ford took office. The provincial tribunal system has never been perfect. We know this to be true, but it did make sense to follow the rules if you were a tenant or a landlord in Ontario. It made sense to apply to the Ontario tribunals if your human rights were not being respected. You could expect timely results if you were denied essential support from Ontario's Disability Support Program. This is no longer the case. Justice delayed is justice denied. And justice being denied is not just happening in one or two tribunals. It's happening in many tribunals. Take, for example, the Landlord-Tenant Tribunal, with its all-time historical high backlog of over 32,800 cases, or the Human Rights Tribunal with 8,979 backlog cases. The delays don't end there, as the Auto Accident Benefits License Appeal Tribunal has now soared to a backlog of over 16,204 cases, and anyone looking for a hearing at the Social Benefits Tribunal should know that there are over 9,700 people already waiting in line. So to summarize, in Ontario, we have over 67,736 backlog cases. That is for the average Ontarian. Let me put it simply to you this way. It would mean that you would have to avoid dealing with rent. You're going to not want to drive, ensure that you don't have to experience discrimination or not want to live with a disability in case you have a dispute. You are not going to get a timely resolution. Welcome to Doug Ford's Ontario. Doug Ford's tribunal backlog was avoidable. Ford could have maintained, or better yet, increased legal aid funding, but instead he chose to cut. Ford could have reappointed existing and new competent, qualified, nonpartisan adjudicators when vacancies opened up in the tribunal system. Instead, Ford gave up political patronage appointments to big PC donors and supporters, and to people like former PC MPP Jeremy Roberts, who failed to get re-elected in June. He was appointed to a tribunal. Ford could have invested new money in Ontario's tribunals to help keep wait times stable during the pandemic. Instead, we saw inexperienced adjudicators who barely knew how to use Zoom evict non-English-speaking tenants who did not know how to unmute themselves or offer defense in English during their hearing. And let's be clear, the Landlord-Tenant Board was in crisis before the pandemic. Ontario's Ombudsman began an investigation into the LTB delays as early as 2020, before the coronavirus turned our world upside down. This pivotal and reputedly scathing report shall be released in the upcoming months. It will tell us why and how the LTB is not meeting its 30-day standard of obtaining a hearing. It will also reveal many other truths. Ontarians need to be ready to fight like hell for access to justice. Because I don't trust Ford to not seize the opportunity to give his corporate landlord insider friends the eviction rubber-stamping kangaroo courts that we know that they crave. If Ford wanted to put aside political patronage and favors, fixing Ontario's tribunals is not a complicated process. They need a robust, nonpartisan appointment process that can recruit the most competent and fair decision makers. The independent and nonpartisan organization Tribunal Watch Ontario has proposed many reasonable solutions to fix the tribunal roadmap, which the Ford government can copy and take credit for. Ford must allow tenants and landlords to have access to online hearings when they want to choose an in-person hearing as a form of accommodation. He should be able to compensate everyone in the tribunal system appropriately by stopping his appeal of Bill 124. Allow me to share just a few points of the tribunal, how to fix tribunal roadmap as offered by the Tribunal Watch Ontario. There are many resolutions that they propose. I'm going to highlight just a few of them. They start by asking the Premier to admit that there is a problem. Fixing our tribunals require political will and capital, but the dividends to all Ontarians will be very worthwhile. There should be an allocation of new resources to Ontario's tribunal system. Everyone in our justice system has been working incredibly long hours throughout the pandemic. We cannot have and expect more output from the exhausted workers. They need and deserve more support. Tribunal Watch Ontario also suggests that people with subject matter experts, adjudicative and mediation experience be appointed. Imagine that. Getting qualified people to be appointed. Again, Tribunal Watch Ontario has created a plan for this government to create such a tool, a mechanism called Adjudicative Tribunal Justice Council that oversees tribunal administration and appointments. They are telling the Ford government to depoliticize and reprofessionalize Ontario's tribunals, and every Ontarian will be better off if that is done. Another suggestion is to create specialized teams to deal with the backlog in all tribunals. We cannot wait months or years for justice. No one can. People's lives are on hold. There's too much at stake. Tribunal Watch Ontario is suggesting that the tribunals continue to accept new cases and stay afloat while everyone who has waited for years can finally access justice because of the specialized team that's created to deal with specifically the backlog. There are a whole host of other recommendations. I don't have the time to get into all of it, but I'd be more than happy to personally deliver a copy of the recommendations from Tribunal Watch Ontario to Mr. Ford, and hopefully he will read it. He doesn't have to wait for the Ombudsman's report. Many of the solutions are already there. Action should be taken now. So, we know that under Ford, things could get worse, and he has a pattern and a history of not learning from his mistakes. And under his leadership, oftentimes, things have gotten worse. He has underfunded Tribunals Ontario. He has cut legal aid funding. He's made blatantly partisan appointments that serve no one but his friends. And I have reviewed many of his public appointments and have often been shocked while researching his candidate biographies to see their lack of subject matter expertise. Each and every single one would expect that if someone is in a position to adjudicate over a conflict, that they would have expertise in law in that subject matter. That is not the case. So that's why Ford is making things worse. Tribunals Ontario has said that offering in-person hearings as a form of accommodation is good. It is necessary. Yet, since the beginning of 2020, they have only heard one in-person hearing as a form of accommodation. Let me just repeat that for you. Tribunals Ontario has said that they're offering in-person hearing as a form of accommodation. And since 2020, across this province, there's only been one in-person hearing. So that means that Ontarians are continuing to pay the rent on these regional offices and locations while the lights are kept dark. There are many reasons beyond the Human Rights Code grounds to provide an in-person hearing. For example, where someone has many documents to rely on, they have to be able to present that evidence in person. It would be much easier. And if that person lacks the mental endurance to focus on an all-day hearing while looking at a screen, or they lack the appropriate devices or stable internet that prevents them from participating, or they may have a highly contentious case or an opponent that tends to lie, you are not able to make objections in a timely manner because you cannot always unmute yourself. Therefore, you are put at a disadvantage. None of these examples are grounds under the code. Tribunal Ontario could offer several different formats of rights similar to the Social Security Tribunal. At the Landlord-Tenant Board, they dissuade parties to seek an in-person hearing by calling it a video hearing, by telling parties after the application is filed that they offer video and sometimes phone hearings due to the pandemic, forcing the requester to have several meetings and produce medical evidence to justify their need, shared with the other side through the new portal system. Having your landlord learn the reasons why you need an in-person hearing infringes on a tenant's privacy. Beyond medical reasons, perhaps the tenant is a survivor, perhaps they're living with gender-based violence situation, perhaps they cannot hold that hearing safely in their home. They do not want their landlord to know all of this because it bears absolutely no outcome on their housing case. Ontarians should worry that Ford will not touch our broken appointment system. He will not fix it because he's ideologically committed to undermining the faith in the public sector. Ford will likely make increasing rent above guideline and evicting tenants significantly easy for large corporate landlords. We will have to take a look at how legal loopholes in the community legal aid clinics who continue to retain staff are able to address the concerns of their clients. Ford must increase funding for staffing support in order for the tribunals to work. It's the only way to fix the problem. There is no reason why he needs to wait for the Ombudsman's report, which we know is still months away, but it is coming, as I've been assured. Ontario's tribunal do not make viral media headlines daily. They are bureaucratic, they're legal, they're highly technical in nature. However, Ontario's tribunals do underpin the rule of law in Ontario. The rule of law and access to justice are expectations of every single Ontarian, whether Ford's broken tribunal system makes the headlines or not. In doing so, we need to be able to provide people that access to justice. We need them to be able to have a pathway to remediation so that they can have even a sliver of justice. I often think of democratic institutions, especially in times like this. We have a lot of political instability and war in the world. I think about my wife's stepfather and family who are Ukrainian, and our extended family who lives now in a war zone. And I think about how absolutely important our democratic institutions are, especially as I see our own in Ontario under threat. Every government must recognize this. This is a time to fix the problem. It is only going to get worse. Our backlog will only increase. And if we have learned anything from Bill 28, which was our win last year when Ford tried to overturn our charter rights, is that when Ontarians unite, they can force Doug Ford to do the right thing. Ontario now needs to unite. We need to get ready to fight, to fix our tribunal systems, to clear the backlogs, to fix healthcare, to defend public education. I'm joined today by MPP Jessica Bell and Sean Hua, a tenant who is bearing the brunt of Ford's delay. I welcome them to the podium.
Kristen, thank you so much for your very complete summary, an important summary of what is happening in the tribunal system today. My name is Jessica Bell. I'm the MPP for University Rosedale and the Ontario NDP's Housing Critic. The Landlord-Tenant Board, which is what I'm going to speak about, the Landlord-Tenant Board is the busiest tribunal in Ontario today. It rules on disputes between tenants who see a house as a home and landlords who see that very same house as an investment. Let's be clear. The Landlord-Tenant Board is failing in its duty to provide fast, fair and affordable access to justice to every Ontarian that needs it. A tribunal as important as the Landlord-Tenant Board should not be performing as poorly as this. It takes months, sometimes years, for an Ontarian to get their day in court. And as a result of this, sometimes tenants in particular are forced to live in very difficult conditions. Sometimes they're forced to live in squalid conditions. Some face daily harassment from a landlord. Some are illegally evicted by force, never to return to their home. And that is all because the Landlord-Tenant Board is failing in its very basic duty of giving everyone access to a fast, fair and affordable hearing. The Landlord-Tenant Board's digital-only process, which began during the pandemic, is disorganised and chaotic and often fails in its duty to provide people with a simple and fair hearing. We have heard from lawyers, legal aid lawyers, time and time again, that people who are not able to fully participate in an online hearing because they do not have a good internet connection, they do not have enough cell phone minutes, they don't speak English or French fluently, or they just don't have enough cell phone minutes in their phone to sit on hold for hours, are being denied their access to their fair day in court. No one should be evicted from their home just because they are booted from an online hearing because of a poor internet connection. And that is happening at the Landlord-Tenant Board today. This is what we are calling on the Ford government to do. The Landlord-Tenant Board should be ensuring that everyone gets access to a hearing within 30 days. That is the Landlord-Tenant Board's own standard, and the Ford government needs to provide the funding necessary and the qualified impartial adjudicators necessary for that to happen. We are also calling on the Landlord-Tenant Board to reform its online hearing process so everyone can get access to a hearing. Doesn't matter what language you speak, doesn't matter how rich or poor you are, doesn't matter how tech-savvy you are. That is a fundamental human right. It will also require the Landlord-Tenant Board to return to those who want it, either a landlord or tenant who requests it, to provide an in-person hearing to those who need it. This is Ontario, and access to justice is a human right. I next want to introduce Sean. He's a constituent of mine who can talk about the reality of what the Landlord-Tenant Board is like for tenants. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, MPP Bell, and thank you, MPP Wong-Tam. I will share my experience in Landlord-Tenant Board. I'm a tenant living in a rooming house, sharing the common area with other tenants. I filed my tenant's application in 2019 to Landlord-Tenant Board because after I organized my roommate to collectively to reject my landlord's unlawful rent increase, she started to harass us, including pushing, yelling, slamming doors, and creating loud noise for hours, sending threatening messages, vandalizing our property, and interfering with our use of the common area. Unfortunately, my tenant's rights application has been delayed for more than 3 years, and nothing has been resolved yet. During the delay, my landlord has been escalating the harassment, and nobody has intervened. In 2020, during the pandemic, the landlord moved into the rooming house to infringe our tenant's right 4 times and claimed she wanted to sell the house. All the tenants moved out except my girlfriend and me. In 2021, the landlord claimed for renovation and started to tear down the interior wall, making the common area unavailable with piles of rubbish, clutter, and garbage. In 2022, the landlord started extensive renovation. She cut off the heating and electricity in March and tore down the kitchen and washroom. Throughout the year, we have been seeking help from the police, fire department, rental housing enforcement, electricity safety authority, municipal licensing and standard, and many more. All of them refer us back to Landlord-Tenant Board. In 2023, I'm still waiting for my Landlord-Tenant Board hearing to have my 2019 filed application heard. Delayed justice is justice denial. The spirit of Residential Tenancy Act is to protect tenants from unlawful rent increase and unlawful eviction. However, if no one is enforcing the law is meaningless. I have been waiting for my application to be heard for more than 3 years. With such long delay, it means for tenants who are in a similar situation like me, they are more likely to be evicted than getting a chance to to assert their right. It means unlawful eviction. It means their tenant's right has been deprived. It means the legal system is not working for us. I know I'm not alone, and I hope justice can come sooner to everyone who needs it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Sean.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean, and thank you to Jessica Bell, our MPP from University Rosedale, as well as the NDP housing critic. Clearly, the story that you've heard, especially from Sean, I would say, is really what has catapulted us to have this press conference. We want to be able to highlight the fact that the numbers that are identified in the backlog, each and every single one of them has a unique story. And it's not even just the physical anguish, it's the psychological and mental anguish of not knowing what happens next. And none of us can plan our days or lives in such a manner. I'd like to open the floor to questions from the media and perhaps those who may be streaming in and watching online. If you could let us know your name, obviously, your media outlet that you're reporting from, and also who is your question directed to, we'd be happy to entertain it.
Emily Pelletier with Le Droit newspaper, and my question is for both MPPs. The issues that you're noticing and the demands that you're making to the government seem quite similar to some that have been made by other parties at Queen's Park, including the Liberals. Would you be willing to work together to ask the government for changes on this?
I'll go first?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think it's important that all of us take interest in making sure that the tribunal system and the justice system works for every Ontarian. It's an absolute right that we all want, and we will work with whoever wants to do this work. I think it's absolutely important. The NDP is not going to wait for any other party. If they're there, that's great. We want to do that work together, but we're taking the lead and we've been continuing to push on this. I've had personally a number of meetings now with the representatives of the Ombudsman's office, specifically asking about the report. When is it coming out? I've been meeting with legal clinics. I have been meeting with tenants and different stakeholders, as well as representatives of Tribunal Watch to sort of hear what their resolutions and recommendations are, and that will continue to happen. And I will let MPP Bell answer for herself.
That's a good answer.
Okay.
And also, you're talking a lot about how this is Ford's, this is caused by Ford, but as you've said and noticed, these are problems that have been happening since way before the pandemic and before he even got into office. So why put all the blame on the Ford government?
Well, the Ford government has a supermajority, and obviously they can take action today. They don't necessarily need anyone else to move forward on this. Recommendations and the solutions have been put forward to them. They've read even the declaration from the Ombudsman when they announced that they were going to begin an investigation, and that's probably one of the reasons why, being able to recognize that the problems existed before the Ford government took place is important. So under the Liberal government, they did not fix the ongoing problems with the tribunal system. But it's important for us to recognize that Ford has made it significantly worse. And this is why it is so critically important for him to take action now. We cannot wait. We just heard from Sean. He's been waiting